Hi, Ann Cornick from Paint and Porcelain. Today I'd like to do a session on, how to get started in China painting. The purpose of my being here is to teach beginners how to get started in China painting and recruit experienced painters to paint along with us. And one of the things I've noticed is that my basics gives you, what kind of things you need as far as tools and equipment to get started with China painting, but doesn't really get you to painting that first piece. So I'm going to give you the steps between buying all of the equipment and actually getting that paint on that very first piece for you. Okay, we're going to talk first about mixing your paints. And it's important that when you mix your paints that you use a mineral oil. And you can get mineral oil up at the, hardware, drugstore, just about anywhere. So this is what you want to get. You want to get a whole bottle like this because it's certainly going to last you for a while. And then you're going to want to either put it in a dropper bottle like this, or if you don't have a dropper bottle, get a larger bottle and just dip the end of your palette knife into the oil, just the very tip, like that much, and get it on your knife, and then mix your paint. So let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to tilt you down so you can see exactly what I'm doing. Okay, here is I have a tile to mix my paint on. This is my paper towel that I'm going to use in order to wipe off my palette knife and everything when I'm done. And the paint that I'm going to mix today is this. I'm going to use a dark color. I'm going to mix a little bit of banding blue for you. You're going to put about a pea size of banding blue on your tile. Then you're going to take your dropper if you have it, or you're going to dip the end of your palette knife into the mineral oil, just the very tip, and you're going to put about the equivalent of 2 drops to get you started. Always put less than you need to get started. You can always add more later, okay? And you're going to start by making swirling motions and pulling the powder into the liquid. Swirling motions, that's how you get started. And as you do this, you're going to flip your knife over because you will have some powder on the back of your knife. And you're just going to keep doing that. Now, let me bring this closer. You can see I have about as much on my knife as I have here. And when I swirl it, it's not going very easily. So I know I need a little more of the mineral oil. So I'm going to put it back down here. I'm going to take a drop, but since I know that I'm close to the consistency of toothpaste, which is about what you want all of your paints at, I'm going to put the drop of oil way over to the side. So the drop of oil is here, my paint is here, and now I'm going to do similar to what we would do with the palette knife alone. I'm going to go take that drop of oil, I'm just going to pull up a little bit of it and put it in my paint. And I'm going to start scraping it up, mashing it out, both sides of my knife, scraping it up, mashing it out, and really mashing down a couple of times. Scraping it up, mashing it down. Okay, now I've got both sides of my knife cleaned off. I'm going to take the very tip of my knife and I'm going to just go along here and pull it onto the tip of the knife so I get a nice little wad of it. And then I'm going to put it on my palette by just pressing down. I'm going to clean my palette knife and I'm going to take a piece of Kleenex and I'm going to wipe off my tile, because if you mix more than one paint, or if you paint anything on here and you have that much of the powder, you're going to pick it up with your brush or with whatever you pick next. If you're doing multiple mixings of paint, you want to keep it as clean as possible so one paint does not contaminate another. And if you're painting, you don't want to pick up the powder, because if you get that on your piece, it will leave a dark spot. So you want to make sure that you've cleaned everything off as the best you can. And then at the very end, I usually turn over my paper towel or get a fresh paper towel. Now this is, let me show you here. This is one piece of paper towel folded in half, or I'm sorry, it's two segments, folded in half and folded in half again, and I put it under here. So I have 4 thicknesses. You can use paper towel. You can also use, if you have a lint-free cloth of some kind, you can also use that. Sometimes people tear up bed sheets and things like that to use for this. So those are some options. I like the paper towel. It's easily disposed of, and I haven't had any problems with it. So that's what you use your mineral oil for. Now, you're going to be putting your paints on your palette, and you can use a Sharpie, which is a permanent marker, but a Sharpie on china can be wiped off, or if you put it on your china to draw your design, it will fire off in the kiln. The nice thing about using a Sharpie to label all of your paints, and I'll show you my palette here, you can see each one of my paints is labeled with the name, is that if you write on here and then later on you change your paints, you can just wipe it off and put a new name on there. So label all your paints. The other thing you may have noticed, and let me just seal that up, is that I have a grid on here. Most of the paint palettes that you'll get come with a clear glass. And I took a ruler and drew squares, the amount of space that I wanted them apart, so that I could space out my paints and get as many paints as possible. This is a very large palette. Most people start with a mini palette, which looks like this. It's an itty bitty little thing, you can see, compared to my larger palette. And I did the same thing on here. And if you're starting out, you're probably going to start out with a very minimal number of colors. In fact, on my website, and you can find the information about my website, which is Paintnporcelain, paint, and then the N, porcelain, but all one word, .com. I do sell a starter set of paints, and that will get you enough paints to get yourself started with most of the basic flowers and different things that you may want to paint. But I did the same thing here. I put the piece of paper underneath with the lines on it and then spaced out my paint. Now, when you're not using your paint, make sure you cover it. That will keep it nice and dry, moist, so it doesn't dry out on you. Alrighty, so now let's talk about getting ready to paint, really. The first thing you need to know is how to load your brush. So I would say you should have a liner. You should have at least a 2 or a 4. Those are number sizes. Or you should have a 1/4 inch, a 1/2 inch, and maybe an inch, although that's awfully big, or a 2 or a 4, if you're by numbers, maybe a 6 or an 8, and then a 10. This is a 10. I use it a lot, but I was taught to paint with the largest brush possible. This is a quill, and this is the metal ferrule. If you're used to the quill, use the quill. If you're used to this, use this. You don't have to get expensive brushes, but these brushes, the quills, need to be trained to flatten out like this, the way that this already does. So this is a little easier brush for a beginner to start with. Brushes are available, as well as china and supplies, at DallasChina.com or MarylandChina.com. And you can also get china there. Okay, so talking about the different strokes we're going to use and how to load your brush. You're going to start by cleaning your brush, and I use odorless mineral spirits. There are several different kinds. I use the Jasco only because I know it works fine. Don't get the one that has a stripper in it. If it says strippies or stripper mineral spirits, you don't want it. It's very grainy and gritty and it won't work the way it should. But just regular odorless mineral spirits is what you're looking for. You usually put it in a jar like this. I put some marbles in the bottom, and that absorbs a lot of the residue that comes off your brush when you're cleaning it. And then periodically when I get down too low and the marbles are at the top, I just take them out, drain the gunk out of the jar, and clean it with my Kleenex and wash off all the marbles and then put them all back in. And you start all over. For painting, I use medium plus. You can get various China painting mediums. And you probably want one that's going to stay open for a while. There are two kinds, a closed and an open. Closed is a drying medium. So you put it on and like in 10 minutes it's dry or starting to dry and it's harder to move. An open medium stays open. Medium plus is an open medium. And I keep it in a small jar too. And I make sure that my largest brush will fit in the jar so that I have it on hand when I need it. Okay, so I start out by cleaning my brush in my mineral spirits, and you use your middle finger, this finger, and you press down to really get the mineral spirits off your brush. You can see the first time I did this, the second time I did that. So you want it fairly dry, and you don't want to see any color on your towel. If you do, you keep cleaning it till the color is gone. Then you dip the very end of your brush, the very top. And I don't know if you can see it there, but it's just, see how it's just a little bit of the top. Yeah, you can. It's just from here up, the top quarter perhaps, in oil. And again, you press it just once. You saw I pressed it just once. Then you choose the paint you want. I'm going to choose a dark color so that you can see it. Now, this is called a full load, and that's when you put it in the paint, you swirl the edge around a little bit, and you get the color on there so that it covers the entire tip of the brush. Let me do this again. I have a little oil on there. Let me do this. And you can see that is a full load. Straight across, pretty much the same value all the way across. We also have, you got to clean your brush again, what we call a side load. There are two kinds of side load. You can side load with just one color to get a particular area or to just add a particular color and add shadow. And you notice I'm cleaning with my mineral spirits, and then I'm going back into my medium and just dipping the edge, patting it once or maybe twice. You'll be able to tell. If you get too much oil on your finger, you'll know. So most of the time you do a side load with two colors. I'm going to start out using a chartreuse, and I full load. I go into the paint. Let me show you here. I go into the paint and I swirl my brush around a little. Then I come down to the green, the darker green, and I only do the left half or the thumb half, whatever side. If you're left-handed, it's always the side your thumb is on that you would fill with the side load. Same thing if you're right-handed. And again, you just make a kind of a C-stroke into that. And this is what it will do. It will give you an automatic shading. See how the grade goes from light to dark? That's what's called a side load with two colors. If you only did the one color, you'd only see the dark. Okay. So that's how you side load and full load your brush. Now, you can see as I'm cleaning my brush here, I'm getting a little bit of color. I don't want that, so I'm going to go back in. I'm tapping my brush against the side like this to get the mineral spirits into my brush, and then I'm pushing on it to get the paint out of the brush. All right, let's talk about the kinds of strokes that there are. I'm going to clean off my tile really well so you can see what I'm doing. There are actually 4 kinds of strokes that we use fairly regularly. And you'll know what they are because they sound just like they're supposed to. The first one that I'm going to teach you is a comma stroke. You usually side load your brush. You just make a swirl, a C into the paint that you want to use. And you're going to make a comma stroke. And a comma stroke is like this. Just what it looks like. You start at the top and you make a comma. Quick swirl. Side loading again, I'm going to show you a C stroke. It's the reverse of that. This is a C stroke. Comma stroke, C stroke. You can go all the way around like this and all the way around like this, but those are the first 2 kinds of strokes you have. Then of course there's the flat color stroke where you load the full brush in the color and you're just painting a flat color like this. That's a flat color stroke. Finally, and I'm going to clean my brush for this because it's getting a little gunky. You will notice if your color starts getting muddy or it starts dragging, you either need to clean your brush or you need to add a little more oil. I usually add oil if the brush is starting to drag for me. Let me use a slightly different color. I think I will use a blood red. It's a nice bright color too. And I'm going to show you hash stroke. The hash stroke, you go this way very lightly. Then you go this way very lightly. You see how I'm making kind of crisscross there? But you're on the back of your brush. You're way back here at the very end. And you're just trying to blend. It's a blending stroke. So if the paint starts running away from you this way, you go out on the outside and catch it. If the paint starts running away from you this way, you go on the outside and catch it. And you just keep blending. Now, you can also blend colors. So I've got this green here, and I'm going to blend. Now, they don't make a very pretty color, do they? But you can see I can blend those colors together. Now, most of the other strokes, you're holding it like a pen. But when you're doing this kind of a hash mark, or hash, which is more or less a background stroke, you want to go out as far as you can on the end of your brush. And then when you start seeing little lines appear, you pat it on your towel and go back and just lightly do it again until you get it to really blend nicely. Now, one thing I'm going to tell you right now is you always paint towards yourself. It's easier to get control if you paint towards yourself. So I would think that that's something important. Now, when you first get your palette, you're going to want to decide how you're going to organize it when you get your paint. I have my yellows, my oranges, my reds, my greens, my blues. Then I go down to my pinks and my purples. It's kind of like a color wheel. I like to leave spaces between and below it because for me, I found that that gives me a little more space if I need to mix colors or what have you. Always set up your palette the same way. Most people don't set it up like this. They set it up one color in each square, but this is in such small squares on here that if it's too close to the other colors, I find that they mix, and that gives me, I end up having to redo my palette. So if you do the larger squares like we were doing on this small palette, then I would do them right next to each other, and I would do it all the way across. So I'd put one here, 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 here. And I would probably start with the lightest and work down to the darkest. So whatever way you organize your palette, Make sure that you do it consistently. It'll make you a much better painter because you'll be able to find your colors quickly. And if you keep all the blues together and you introduce a new blue, it's easier to decide which blue to use because they're all in the same spot if you need a blue. All right, choosing your china. I would say for the beginner, the best kind of china to get is the glazed china, not the bisque, which is the unglazed china, the porcelain bisque. I would go with the glazed china. And the best piece for a beginner to start on is a flat piece. Most china painting teachers have them start on a flat plate. I like a tea tile because when you're done, you have a border and it kind of finishes the piece off very nicely. The other thing I like is some of the tea tiles come with holes in the back, so you can hang it on the wall or use it as a tea tile, which is basically a hot plate, you know, to put on the table to put hot food on. If you have holes on the back, you will need to mark where the top of the tile is so you don't paint it upside down and then have a problem. So, beginners, what subject should you choose? Again, if you're painting on a flat piece, it stands to reason that the flatter flowers are the easier ones for you to paint. I would say a wild rose, which is something I'll show you a little bit how to get started on today. A daisy, maybe forget-me-nots, violets. Those are all good starter flowers. It doesn't hurt to do some fruit too. Apples are good because they're large and they're easy to do. The leaves are fairly easy to do. And cherries are another good example of something that's fairly easy to do. Most of the time, you'll be painting from a study. So what is a study? Okay, a study is a picture of the item that you want to paint. And if you get a study online or from a teacher, it usually comes with instructions. As I said, I have a website listed below, and I also have studies on there. This is the way my studies look. Most of the teachers have studies very similar. They give you the tools you're going to use, colors you might need, and you don't have to stick to these colors. If you know enough about colors, you can pick another color that's similar and get away with it. Now, my studies are a little different. If I've done a tutorial either on Facebook or YouTube, the link is right here. And mine are electronic, so you can download them. And then you can just click on the link and it'll take you right to the tutorial. And it'll walk you through the steps that are outlined here. If you get the Facebook tutorial, there's some chit-chat that goes along with it. Otherwise, the YouTube is strictly instruction. It'll tell you what to do step by step and what colors to use and what size brush to use for each of the things that you're painting. And you'll probably do several fires, meaning that you're going to fire in between. The first one is your first fire. Then you have instructions on your second fire. And here, for example, it is a picture of how to make a rose leaf and instructions about how to do it. They'll tell you how to do the second fire. Sometimes you have a third fire. There's information on the third fire on here. Most studies also come with what we call a line drawing. Now, the line drawing is important because it allows you to have something that you can trace or draw onto your china to work from. You should try to get a line drawing that's about the same size as the piece you're working on. But in this case, you can see there's quite a bit of difference. So either I will take a portion of it and put on here, or I can shrink this all because it's electronic when you get it from me. Now, not everybody will have that, but if you have a scanner, you can put it into a scanner, scan it, shrink it to the size that you're working on, and that will give you something to go by if you want to trace your study. Then it will walk you through what the first fire should look like, the second fire, so you can see we're adding layers to this, and then the final fire. So most of the time you will get the final piece with instructions and a line drawing. You won't always get all 3 fires or all 2 fires with every study, but there are a number of teachers. They all have studies available. So take your time, pick one that you like, but make sure it's one that has instructions and colors and things so that you can follow along on your own and reading the instructions and just painting it. Okay. As you get on into the harder things like roses, I also have a study that walks you through step by step how to do the roses, and it also has pictures and explanations at each step. And this is also a tutorial online and on YouTube that you can go to and get your information on. Okay, so if we're going to transfer a study to a piece, and let's say I don't draw very well, so my first study I wanted to be as perfect as possible, you can use transfer paper. It has a dark side and a light side. This is what I use. It's called Saral Wrap. You can get it at an art supply place. Blick Art Supplies. Online you can also get Saral, S-A-R-A-L, Saral Wrap. And you cut a size piece for what you're working on. You don't want anything bigger. You don't need it hanging over the side. And you can use this multiple times. You can see I have a little bunny on there. If I were going to put roses on there, I would tape it in place. And then I would take my study, here's my line drawing, and I would scale it down, lay it right over the top, and I would trace and tape it in place. And then I would trace the line drawing with this underneath using a colored pen. And that's important because these are always in black and white. And you want to know where you left off if you get interrupted. So using a colored pen will help you with that a lot. Try to use a fine point pen. With this kind of paper, and it's not carbon paper. Carbon paper will leave too much of a line and probably won't fire out for you. The tracing paper or transfer paper leaves a very light line that fires out fairly easily, so you should be set with that. Okay, so now you're going to get started on your first piece. Now, I'm just going to put a wild rose on here real quickly, and I'm going to just get started. Here's the center of the rose, and I'm going to do, there's 1 leaf, 2 leaves, 3 leaves, 4 leaves, 5 leaves. The center of the rose looks kind of like that. And then if you want to put another one underneath here, I always start with 1, 2, 3. I use a dotted line, as you can see, if I'm drawing it on with the Sharpie, because the more broken the line, the easier it is to fire off. I'm going to put a leaf up here. Maybe put a leaf up here. And maybe a leaf over here. And a leaf down here. I'm sorry, and a leaf up here. And maybe one up here. That just gives you a basis. Normally, you would follow a design and you'd fill in about 2/3 of the plate. I'm just doing this to give you an idea of how we get started. Okay, so you draw your piece on, and I'm going to lower you down now so you can see what I'm doing. The first thing I'm going to do is in the center of this flower, I'm going to do a single load with my mixing yellow, and I'm going to use a side load of my yellow brown. And in fact, I'm going to use yellow brown number 2. It's a little darker. You'll be able to see it better. And I'm going to just shade. I'm going to turn as I go. The lower part of this flower, just like that. Can you see what I did there? And I'm going to do the same thing on the one that's underneath. I'm just going to shade. There, I've got a little more yellow. You can either put the yellow in first, then go back with the full load, and then go back with the side load of the yellow brown and just put in the darker color. Okay? And this is why this particular wild rose is easy for you, or easier to start on. You can use a full load of a light pink, or if you have a pompadour, do it very lightly. In fact, let me do the pompadour because I think you'll see the color a little better on here, because the pink is awfully light. So you can do the full load, just brush it in. Full load here. I'm going around the outside now, pretty much. I'm using Pompadour, which is lightly, which makes a beautiful pink for you. Pinks can be expensive, and this is an easy way to do it. Now that's just a full load, and all I did was I started and sort of outlined the edges, and that gave me my color all the way across. So play with your brush, find out what it'll do. Every brush reacts differently. Now I'm going to side load with a darker pomp, and I'm going to start in the center using my brush this direction. I'm just going to wipe down and use my brush in that direction. And I'm kind of doing short, choppy strokes with the darker side load to give me that shading that I need. Now I could have done it all at once, but I think for a beginner, it's easier to do a little at a time. You know you need some shading here, so just take the side that has the color on it and go around. Then you're going to get back on your brush and do a slight blending of these colors, so you don't have any, and that's what it looks like. Let's do that one more time just so you get the feel. You can start out by doing a full load of a light pompadour and just go around the edges. And let's say you don't do it light enough. Pat your color on your towel and go back in and pull again, and that'll pull some of the color off and make it lighter for you. You do it here, here, and here. You notice I'm turning my china as I go because I'm painting towards myself. We're going to go back into the pomp, side loading with the, so it's only on this side of my brush, the thumb side of my brush. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to do this. I'm going to come down this side of this here because it needs a little bit of a shadow, and come across the bottom. Here I'm just going to come across the bottom with short, kind of flat, choppy strokes. Flat, choppy strokes. They're kind of a little bit like a C stroke, but you sort of cut off in the middle. So this is like a C stroke, but you cut off in the middle, and then here. And then I'm going to hold it back on the end, and I'm going to feather from the light to the dark, meaning this is feathering, where you hold at the end. It's what you use when you're doing your hash stroke, and you just pull lightly, and you barely touch it. The best way to explain feathering is hold your hand like this and hold the back of your brush like I am, and when you feel, just barely feel it touching your hand, that's when you know you've got the feathering down perfectly. Now clean your brush. You're going to another color. You have to clean it out. Make sure there's no color showing. Go into this. Just on the end, I'm going to use chartreuse, and I'm going to paint my leaf. Oh, you're not going to be able to see chartreuse. Let's try moss green. And I'm going to be painting my leaf in. Now, I'm just painting the leaf in the color. I'm going to turn it this way, and I'm going to come back and paint it in. I'm going to do the same thing with this leaf. I'm going to paint the bottom of the leaf. Well, it needs a little bit of oil when it drags like that. And you're going to want to pat it and then go back into the color full load. And then I'm going to go back. It's a little dark, so I patted it on my paper towel to take some of the dark off. And then I'm going to go in here and turn it around and do the same thing coming back. Just fill it in. Now, I want to add the shadows in there. I'm going to take my dark green, my brown green, I have it. I'm side loading only. See, let me show you the side load. When I bring it up here, it's a side load. That's why you have a palette, a tile. You can test and see, you know, did I just side load? Yep, you only side loaded. That's what you want to do. Let me put a little more on there. You're going to start at the bottom, and you're going to do to that line in the middle, stop and lift so you get a little line there, and then go from there to the edge, line to the middle, there to the edge. And these lines are going to go away. So if you want a line there, you're going to have to go up to the line and then tap, tap. That'll give you a little bit of a line there and finish it. Then I would side load again and go back and just lightly do the edge of the leaf. Just the edge. Pick an edge, pick a tip. Just the tip. Okay. So that's what I would do. Those are some of the basic strokes that can get you started. You will need to use a liner to do the center of the wild rose and probably to do the stems. This is a liner. It's a very thin, long brush, or you can get a liner that's a very short brush. I like the long one only because I think it drags a little easier. You're going to load it with some oil, wiggle it back and forth in the color you want, and then you're just going to lightly pull. And that makes those stems. Here, let me do it over here where we don't have any flower painted. You're just going to pull from there to here, and here to there. Sometimes I do it backhanded. It works a little better. I'm going to clean it. I'm going to go into my black brown, and these have a little divot in the center. You're just going to outline it like that. Can you see what I did there? And then you're going to put little dots around. And this is something that if you have the study, you'll learn how to do it. You put little dots everywhere. I know that you can't see me make the dots because I hold the brush backhand, but at least you get the idea. And then you're going to take and put these they're little like stamens or some little things that come out from the middle. And you have to add a little bit of oil for that. So play with your brush. Try your different strokes. That kind of gives you an idea of what the rose is going to look like. So you will need a liner. Make sure you have a liner. And then the final thing we talked about is, so here you have, it's like a half C and then another C, a half C and another C. Then you flip it over and you fill in the end. The background will be, if you're going to do backgrounds, you can fire it now and then do the background so you don't mess up what you've done. But for background, you're going to take your color and you're just going to kind of outline whatever it is you're going behind. And I side loaded this brush. Oops, I have a hair on here. Hang on. Let me get the hair off. There. Side load only. I'm following the contour of the leaf I have here. And then I'm going to start my crosshatch, holding by the very end. It's feathering. You're going to feather this way. Then you're going to feather this way. It's a hatch mark. You're going to go back and forth and pull the paint away from that section, and it'll give you a really nice background. You can go all the way out, and you can use that feathering on your rim if you use a tea tile. Okay, that should give you enough to show you how to get started with China painting and what's involved with it. Let's talk about loading your pen. You're going to have to sign this. This is my pen. I use fresh paint, and this is all fresh paint that I've already mixed up, and I put it on my tile. And then I like a pen medium, but you don't have to use a pen medium. You could use your regular medium. And since you're just starting out, you're probably only going to have your regular medium, so I'm going to show you what to do. You take and dip the end in. Put a little over here on the side, and just start making and pulling it in and making this paint very, very thin. And when it'll drip off the end like this. Then you know it's thin enough. You're going to take your pen, you're going to scoop it up on your pen, and you're going to touch it on your tile to make sure that it's not going to run. And then you decide where the bottom of the tile is, where you want to sign your name. You can sign it in the flowers. You can sign it at the bottom. And you're just going to, here, let me get a little more on my, you may have to load a couple of times to get your name done, unless you have a very nice short name. And there's my signature. Okay, so that's how you do the pen. And you can get two kinds of oil for your pen if you want to use pen oil. One is a drying medium, and one is one that stays open. If you're going to be working on a piece, I would recommend the drying medium. This is it. AGS 21 drying medium pen oil. It says pen oil on it. The AMPS 5 Easy Flow is the non-drying. These both come from Dallas, China. So I would say I would probably order the Easy Flow initially to get used to it, and then after I feel comfortable using pen oil, I would probably go to the drying medium, because I think it's harder to use the drying medium, but it's a good one. Okay, so firing your piece. Let me bring you up now. Firing your piece, let me tell you, there are so many different ways of firing your piece, and a lot of it depends on the type of kiln you have. So I would check with the manufacturer wherever you bought the kiln to see what you should fire it at for China painting. One person says fire it at 015 for everything. That's what she does. I was looking on a site, it's called PPIO, Porcelain Painters International Online. If you join it, it's a one-time membership fee. It's well worth it. They have a great database that you can search, and it will give you all kinds of answers to all kinds of questions that you might have. Another person also told us, you know, some kilns have low, medium, high. Others have cones that you use, these little like triangular things that you put in the kiln. Others have pyrometers that keep track of the heat for you. Some people vent their kiln by opening it a little bit, others don't. So if you have a teacher or a club nearby, ask them. But personally, I have a jewelry kiln, And the manufacturer's recommendation was 45 minutes, and that's what I do. I fire for 45 minutes. So check when you buy, if you're buying a kiln, I would say start with a small one that's easy for you to work, and make sure that before you take it out of the store or place that you bought it, or if you order online, make sure you understand how you work it in order to fire, or find someone who will fire for you. So you fire your piece once you get it the way you want it, in between every coat that you put on it. For this piece, I would probably fire it before I put the background on if I was a beginner. Then I would put the background on and I would fire it again. And then I would go through and add more depth or whatever I needed to. In between each fire, you sand it. And these are sanding blocks. It's a very, 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 very fine sander. And you can get these from Dallas as well. And they will work just great because the sanding blocks are foam and they, conform to the piece that you're working on. So I would say in order to buy supplies, you need to ask a fellow painter or a teacher for local suppliers, and or if they have pens or they have brushes that you think you might be interested in, before you buy it, try it. If somebody has one that you can borrow while you're at class or while you're painting, then use that. So unexpected resources that you may go to, I would start like for a liner, like this. You can buy a liner like this at a craft store, like Joann's or Michael's or any of those. You can get pens, like the one that I was using, this metal one, if you want a metal pen. Or you can get pens that are wood. Let's see, like this, And you can get pens at supply stores, any kind of supply stores, like a art supply store like Dick Blick or Blick's or any of those if you have any in your neighborhood. You can get your erasers and wipeout tools like these. I have these online, but these you can probably buy at, I don't know if Joann's has them or not, but I would think like an art supply place would have it. So check around. Don't pay the high price if you don't have to for some of these things. So I hope that gives you an idea of how to get started with China painting, what to do, where to go to find different things you can China paint, especially now if you can't go to class with a teacher. The next best thing is probably to get yourself a study. Go online, find the tutorial for the study. Mine are right on there. You can pick up the tutorial and I will talk to you, and you can stop it wherever you want and go back over it. And if you have questions, you always can find me on Facebook Messenger, and that's an easy way to reach me. So I appreciate it if you would like this, this workshop on YouTube, and also please subscribe, and that way you'll be notified of things as they come up. I have playlists now for flowers. I have playlists for animals and holiday items that you can work on, and that should get you pretty well started. And then if you would please pass the word along, I would appreciate it very much, and check below for resources that may help you. Thank you very much.